6 months since Nancy Guthrie was taken from her home. Where does the investigation stand right now?
It's very active. We've got a lot of work ahead of us. We've done a lot of work, but we still have more. And there's not just in DNA, where labs across the country are working together, but in forensics analysis of thousands and thousands of videos, photos. And we also have still tens of thousands of tips that come in, and we actively work on them. So it's a very active investigation.
The department released 2 ransom notes. Why now?
Well, really 2 reasons. One, it's out there. People have been, media has covered some of this, and we just saw what was being said, and we felt like we need to put something out that's really accurate. And this was the time. We felt like investigators felt like there's a number of pieces of information in these notes that it just might jar someone to say, I've heard that, or the wording, the style of the writing is, it might jog somebody to kind of think about who would have written this, how was this done? I think anybody who reads them, my investigators, we look at it, and clearly there's things in there that are very concerning to our investigative team. So we hope that by releasing the actual note, we'll get some response from the community.
Did the Guthrie family know you'd be releasing this?
Absolutely.
6 months in, what's your relationship with the FBI?
It's a good relationship. It's always been a good relationship. We've been a member of what is known as the Southern Arizona Violent Crime Task Force, headed up by the FBI, for decades. We've always participated, and to this day we still do. It's not just a great relationship; it's one that's very valued.
What's your message to the community?
We think somebody knows something. We hope that by releasing some of this information, it will jog somebody to think about what. A lot of people have called this with information, but we also know a lot of people are hesitant to do so. And so I hope that by constantly reminding the public, we're here, we're not going anywhere. If you have information, someone knows who this person is. Someone knows something. We want that person to call us. We need that phone call.
Why haven't you held a press conference about this case?
The press conferences are actually more designed for when you have a very specific piece of information that you want out in front and you need help with. We do that. In this regard, we felt like just a media release was sufficient.
What's your message to the Guthrie family?
We're still here. We are not going away. If you could just see the team working, you would see the energy, the concern. They're fired up, and we'll continue to work this case hard.
Is there anything that I forgot to ask or that you want to add?
There is a number of issues have been brought up about people being cleared of this investigation. We served a few search warrants. We talked to individuals. And we move on, because if the evidence is there, we continue that path. But that doesn't mean those individuals are cleared. It just means that we met with them because we felt like there was a need. There was probable cause established through evidence, tips, whatever, and presented to a court, and we went on. Does that mean those individuals are cleared? Not necessarily. It just means that we took a look at something that was concerning to us, and now the evidence takes us elsewhere. But more to that point, I can't be more clear. I said this earlier on, and I say it again. The Guthrie family is not and have not been suspects in this investigation. We have talked with them.
Now, that's obviously not what Ashley Banfield reported in the very beginning. What's interesting about that, and this is the video that was released by Pima County Sheriff Chris Danos, and you wondered why there was such an uptick last week. You had Savannah putting out a video, very different, addressing the kidnappers. And then they released this video, meaning the sheriff. Then they released the ransom notes. But what I'm not sure everyone is aware of is, to me, what really sparked this was not only the 6-month, hit the 6-month mark, but the Wall Street Journal came out with a very well investigated piece, researched. One thing that I find is there's a lot of people that are kind of new to, I'm not just going to say true crime, but just new to following media and things like that. And what I find is a lot of these individuals, to them, everybody is the same. They can't discern the difference between the Wall Street Journal, TMZ, New York Times, whoever. There are some individuals that think basically all media is the same. As a matter of fact, some people actually put more weight to certain people online on different platforms and don't realize that, the Wall Street Journal is not only the largest newspaper in the world with the most bureaus all over the world, but they have a very high threshold for what they publish. And they have a fair but scathing piece about the sheriff and the investigation. And I'm convinced not a lot of people know that. There's people that are kind of new into this stuff, and there's so much that they don't know about media, and little stuff. I'm not, I'm saying, like, they don't know, they'll see a title on an article and they think the writer picked out the title, not knowing that a lot of times it's an editor or someone like that picks it. But again, that may seem, like I'm just like splitting hairs here. But my point is, when the Wall Street Journal puts something out, people may not realize it, but it just carries a lot more weight. So I believe this whole media uptick that we saw with the sheriff and the releasing of the ransom notes and so forth, I believe this was a response to the Wall Street Journal story, of which I'm going to get to a little bit in just a moment. It's through a paywall, but they broke some news with it. The Wall Street Journal. Another thing that people don't realize is the feds don't bring charges. There's a big difference between local and then when you are talking about FBI, U.S. attorney. They don't bring charges unless it's a slam dunk and they can prove it in court. They have a higher threshold. And that's why so many cases that the FBI brings forward, they never go to trial, because the U.S. attorneys don't bring the charges unless they're really confident that they're going to get a guilty conviction. And their guilty conviction is astronomically high. You had about, the gambling ring, if you remember, some former NBA players. And what do they say out of the box? They're not guilty. They're innocent, meaning they're different attorneys. They're going to prove blah, blah, blah. But instead, they end up then just quietly pleading guilty. I believe that's why, number one, she's no longer with News Nation, but Ashley Banfield, there's a couple out there. She's one of them. That's why I believe it or not, but I think that's why Brian Enton, they won't give him an interview, because it's what Ashley Banfield did with News Nation. And again, what's unfair to, I think, Brian is notice that she's not even with News Nation anymore. So, but this is really important, because when the sheriff was saying that no one's cleared, I see people post, see, you watch, this is. So then he has to go the extra length and say, I'm not talking about the family.
Worked with them. They are not suspects. They are victims of a very horrific crime.
If someone does have information that may help investigate.
By the way, and I want to point out, and I've said this before, I talk to so many different people, and they do think that the family's involved. They do think that. And there are some different people out there that keep pushing that narrative, and I believe that's why Savannah kind of pushed back on that, and she made a statement about it. So I don't think she was talking about some of the people that were covering it in front of the house. I think she was talking about some of these other individuals. So a little more high profile, like an Ashley Banfield, like a Megyn Kelly, like that Maureen O'Connell. I'll say one thing about, boy, they have fans. Folks, I want to remind you about quality asphalt seal coating. Today is a good day and a good example that if you have a garage basement or a patio epoxied, they improve the appearance, prevents fluids or the liquids from penetrating, and it makes a huge difference for your home or business. Decorative concrete epoxy floors for your garage, basement, or patio. Call Corey today. There they are, quality asphalt seal coating, 401-283-9815. Now remember, they do commercial seal coating, parking lots, crack sealing, line striping. Makes a huge difference. Keep your parking lot safe. Asphalt patch repair. Seal coating improves the look of your parking lot. That's how customers judge you as they arrive. It's quality asphalt seal coating, 401-283-9815. I am aware that there are some people that they prefer the comments. They like platforms where I'm going to take issue with that. Like, that's such a broad statement. No one is cleared until someone is arrested. That is not true, because in the course of an investigation, there are some people that immediately can be cleared. The reasons why investigations, this statement that this person put, is not true, because if you follow, and you don't have to take my word for it, I don't know who's saying that in law enforcement, but the reason why investigations move forward is because it's the ability to eliminate people as suspects. There are people that may start out as a suspect, and then as they look into it and go into it, they realize that they have a solid alibi, that they were truthful with police, and therefore law enforcement, they're no longer considered a suspect. So that's such a broad statement. I strongly recommend. There's a great, it's new. It just was dropped last week on Netflix. The bombing of Pan Am 103. That was the Lockerbie, Scotland is where it went down. That was Libya. If you watch that, I strongly encourage you to watch it, because you really see the brilliance of Scotland Yard, the FBI, how they approach an investigation. And in the course of that investigation, there are people that are no longer suspects. So that general statement, that premise, is a false statement. So, for instance, if you follow this, that means at all times, until someone's arrested, nobody is clear. That's actually not true. As someone and I learned that in dealing with law enforcement, there are some people that immediately are cleared for various reasons. And by the way, and that allows them to proceed with the investigation. So some people put out these general statements, and I saw there's more talk of that. To me, some of the talk and people that put that, it's a subtle, it's a passive aggressive way to really say that the family is still suspects. That's really what they're doing. They don't want to come out and say that. So now some of the other individuals that they did serve search warrants on. So the individuals that they did serve search warrants on, it's hard to believe, that suddenly they're going to make an arrest on Luke Daly. And what I mean by that is, it would be hard to believe that when they went through the house, went through everything, that they weren't able to uncover something that would pin him to it. So I just don't know. And as far as the sheriff, I'm going to get to the Wall Street Journal piece. Actually, I'll do it right now and mention. I also want to be very clear with people that you should be very cautious of who you're referring to. Like his, does that mean? So I'm speaking. Does that mean me? Is that who the person's referring to? His. Is that me? Is that the sheriff? I'd be a little, you could be a little more specific with who you're referring to in something like that. Because if I were just tuning in and saw a statement like that, I would think that the person's referring to me. Let's just say Leslie is on the screen and I type in, her brain is like Jello. I mean, that's who then we would think of. But the Wall Street Journal, what they reported, and this to me is why there was such a reaction and so much information coming from it. The Pima County Sheriff deputies initially gave little attention to the dried blood on Nancy's front porch, reportedly wondering whether it came from an unrelated head bump or nosebleed. Testing later confirmed it was Nancy's blood, and authorities now believe it was connected to the kidnapping. Think about that. They saw the blood, but didn't think it had anything to do with the kidnapping. I also want to, I'm not trying to jump on anybody, but no one knows the answer to this. Like, do you think, who could say that? No one can answer that. That's unknowable. Will she ever, who could answer that? How do you ask a question that can't be answered? No one knows that. And no one, I don't see how anyone could have a positive opinion on that in any way. So now, again, according to the Wall Street Journal, the outlet reports deputies failed about the dried blood. They also immediately failed to tape off the Tucson property, leaving reporters, live streamers, even Amazon pizza delivery drivers free to approach the porch. I was there when that happened. Authorities didn't put up crime scene tape until 3 days after Nancy disappeared. Meanwhile, investigators reportedly burned precious time debating whether they had a kidnapping or routine missing person case on their hands. What I find about that is the fact that we've heard this, that they were playing the odds, that most of the time when they get called out, it's because an elderly person has wandered away. People, they're going to go down to their mailbox and then they think, what did I come out here for? Then they start wandering around the neighborhood. Or they think, I'm going to go over to the neighbor's house, and then they lose their way. And around there's a lot of ravines. There's definitely different ways that someone could fall. Then you also had the problem with the aircraft. Their aircraft, they didn't have a deputy qualified to operate the aircraft camera system. The plane didn't begin searching until 6:30, when darkness limited what its zoom camera could capture. So the sheriff disputed the Wall Street Journal findings, insisting the case remains active. But I believe all of this talk that you're hearing him, and just the video, and that they put out an awful lot of information. I believe it was tied into this Wall Street Journal report.
That you want to add?
There is a number of issues have been brought up about people being cleared of this investigation. We served a few search warrants. We talked to individuals, and we move on, because if the evidence is there, we continue that path. But that doesn't mean those individuals are cleared. It just means that we met with them because we felt like there was a need. There was probable cause established through evidence, tips, whatever, and presented to a court, and we went on. Does that mean those individuals are cleared? Not necessarily. It just means that we took a look at something that was concerning to us, and now the evidence takes us elsewhere. But more to that point, I can't be more clear. I said this earlier on, and I say it again. The Guthrie family is not and have not been suspects in this investigation. We have talked with them, worked with them. They are not suspects. They are victims of a very horrific crime.
If someone does have information that may help investigators, where should they call?
Either tip line, 1-800.
Again, that's the PIO officer, by the way. I think it's interesting. Instead of having him sit down different interviews, this is a different approach that they are taking. I feel that the sheriff's under tremendous pressure on this case. Tremendous pressure on this case. Now, the fact that they released the ransom notes, obviously, I don't think they'd be releasing them unless they felt that they were, that they were credible. And what jumps out, what's interesting also to me is there's so much of this that we had heard, and then you'd hear rumbling, and then it's not fully confirmed, but this business of and this was in the first one, she had a white smartwatch on the floor of her bed and the floodlight was out. So I can see why they took that very seriously, because boy, that, they haven't confirmed that. The fact that they're releasing it leads me to believe that that is where they found her watch. And we had heard about that floodlight in the back. So, if you just back up for a second, think of, she's gone. She is absolutely vanished. And suddenly they receive this note. And it's, to that local TV station in Tucson. And boy, this would certainly make sense. She's gone. Someone says, we have her. Hi, Savannah. We have your mother, Nancy, knows the name, identifies about the watch, the floodlight. How would someone know that about the watch and the floodlight? I could see why that would certainly get your attention. That would certainly get your attention. How would someone, the obvious, how would someone know those types of details? Well, the answer is they wouldn't know those type of details. So now, what happened with that? Now, by the way, just so everyone understands, I'm going to come back to this, but we are going to talk with Justin Katz, managing editor of anchorrising.com. We do have a regular segment, Politics, this week. I'm going to revisit this. We are going to come back to it. But this also comes to what I have been saying, which is, and I know people don't understand this or don't like it or whatever, but they don't have anybody. They just don't. They don't have it. They haven't had it. They don't know who did it. They don't have a suspect. They don't have a vehicle. They don't. Someone got in and out of there and was able to get her and get away. And they don't know who that person is or persons. And I also take issue, by the way, check out DePietro.com, brought to you by the Coesit Inn, 226 Coesit Avenue, West Warwick. Remember what we say, lunch, dinner, drinks and lounge. Now they also have the coffee at Coesit. And by the way, thank you. I hear from so many people now that are popping by and saying, hey, I'm hearing about coffee at Coesit. They have delicious coffees, all different flavors, breakfast sandwiches, breakfast treats. The coffee at Coesit, the Coesit Inn is thriving right now, both in the morning, noon, and night, the Coesit Inn, and they're open 7 days a week. And also, this portion of the program brought to you by Propane Plus, serving Rhode Island and Massachusetts. You can depend on Propane Plus for all your heating and cooling, residential or commercial. It's Propane Plus. Call them today, but the easiest thing to do is log on to their website. It's propaneplus.com, and you just type in your zip code, residential or commercial. You can depend on Propane Plus. We are going to come back to the Guthrie conversation. And I feel I've been pretty consistent. As others out there have been saying, they're wrapping up the case. They're going to arrest Porch Guy and this other nonsense. And that's exactly what it is. And I see the people that still put that person on, or people trying to point the finger at the family. To me, the ransom notes make sense. The ransom notes point to the fact that someone got it in their head that they were obviously we had a long time been hearing it was um, a robbery that went wrong, but it sure seems more and more, especially when you see those ransom notes. And we had heard about the second ransom note. We didn't realize she was in bad health. Now, I'll admit, I've interviewed people that said, I don't believe that. Why would someone immediately be apologizing for sending, for that? The second one is basically she's buried with nature and she's in poor health, but they don't even have a demand. I think it's interesting, as some people have pointed out, is really wasn't much of a negotiation. They're not going back and forth. That was true. That had been reported. Um, that had been reported about the nightstand. So you have to realize this is all happening very fluid. And in a situation like this, I regard this as Monday morning quarterbacking. You don't know. You don't know what's going on behind the scenes. You don't know what law enforcement and FBI was saying. You also got to realize that they were seemingly very concerned that it was not legit. I also want to remind people, maybe people, I shouldn't say remind, are unaware that there were a number of ransom notes they received. And so then they're trying to sift through. So I believe the sheriff was overwhelmed. I think he was. And they were not prepared for something like this. But no, I think, and I've thought this for a while, that somebody thought we're going to grab her and we're going to have her for like 24 hours, 48 hours max, and then we're just going to drop her somewhere. And it clearly did not go that way. Now, we are going to come back to it. We are going to come back to it. So, because joining us right now, he is the managing editor of anchorrising.com, and it's time for our segment, Politics This Week, and it is Justin Katz. And Justin, I'd like to start off this. It's so interesting to me that I didn't think the minor league soccer stadium in Pawtucket, I didn't think the deal could get much worse than what initially the state put in. Most expensive minor soccer league stadium in the country. But now when we're learning who the investors were and the fact that they're all well off, and I also want to credit, and I sent you the Folks campaign. I don't know why they didn't get more coverage on that, because Governor McKee out at the Clippers game and the whole, I mean, now I want to hear your thoughts, but what is just to me impossible to defend is you had very wealthy investors. There was no reason for the state to have to taxpayers put up all this money. You had people that had money, a wealthy NBA player and others, and the fact that McKee, where they were hiding the names and we didn't know who it was, and now he wants it released. I just find, as I said, I didn't think this whole stadium deal could get worse, but I was wrong. It is actually worse.
Right. Well, it's worse in a way that was predictable. That's the whole thing of it is you don't need public involvement in these sorts of ventures, and when you get it, it leads to these very kinds of problems. Who gets to know what? Who gets to know who the investors are? Would the investors invest without taxpayer backing? What is McKee taking favors, going to Clippers game, knowing that he's helping to sell shares in the venture, so to speak? Or was he just, and this is very possible, did he just go for the fun of it because it served his ego and he happened to be at the game of the same people who were trying to get the investor and all this stuff? These are the problems you start to get into when you venture down this road in the first place. And as you said a moment ago, it probably wasn't necessary. And you know what? If it's a worthwhile venture, public subsidies shouldn't be necessary. If the
Right.
investment is worth doing, people should be willing to invest in it. And that's why that whole corporatist thing, I mean, folks can hit McKee for this, but I can almost guarantee you she will do very much similar things, just as Raimondo did, just as others did. I mean, McKee's fault in everything is he seems to be very bumbling about these things and get himself caught in bad imaging. But they'll all do it because they subscribe to this form of government corporatism.
I just find, boy, this really fits the narrative where that he tries to paint himself, Coach McKee. I can see him all excited being at the Clipper game and sitting in really good seats and kind of being wooed and wowed. And, Kawhi Leonard and these others, this is insane. When you have that kind of money, the type of money they have, that they can put up money for the team, there was no reason for the state to have to fork over that money. So I just find, now he's saying he demands the list be revealed. The whole thing was just a bad deal from start to finish. Now, Justin, we talk about politics this week, and socialism truly is on the rise. But I want to just get your thought on. I mean, it is kind of comical. The people that are claiming there should be no voter ID, and then you have Mondami saying that if you want to shop at basically a city-run, government-run grocery store in New York, you'd have to be able to show an ID to shop there. One of the reasons I mentioned that I just don't know why local media hasn't picked up on it, but you have Sabina Matos, Lieutenant Governor. She has kind of gone into the grocery store arena, and she wants to get into certain, deals that are there, and she feels that certain stores should be able to operate some way. It is socialism when they want to get involved and start to run private corporations.
It is, and I think what the ID issue for Mamdani really shows is what they say. You can't put any credence in it. There's no, when they talk about voter ID being suppression and so on and so forth, and IDs are racist, they don't care about the principle of ID. They just want people to be able to vote. When they say we will check your ID to get into our grocery store, they care about whether you're making their government venture work or not, or taking, if you're not supposed to be getting this advantage because you buy your vote, so to speak. And then it's the same thing with the news media and others ignoring the same sorts of policies. We see this with, as you just said, we've had this suggestion of public grocery stores and controlling grocery stores in Providence, but we also get it with Morales being a Mamdani type socialist, which doesn't get as much attention as I should. And it's, again, the news media doesn't care about the principle. They'll just ignore this. We don't need transparency. There's a direct connection. Mamdani, DSA is socialist in America. Enrique Sanchez supporting socialists, to Morales. It's a direct connection, but you never hear about it because it's not what they care about. And so I think that, to me, that's the biggest part of it, is that the ID in order to get into a grocery store versus an ID in order to vote, it only shows which of those the socialists value. You can't, but they'll say whatever they think will get them over the line, usually with a nice con man smile, like both Mamdani and Morales are very, very good at.
Yeah, it's funny, Justin, it reminded me of during COVID when there was a neighbor that I had, and I'd see him out walking because, you couldn't go anywhere. But he was a big fan of Gina Raimondo. And this guy, I won't say who it was, but he was in favor of open borders. And he felt, the whole thing, you shouldn't have ICE and let these people come in. But he loved when, you remember the story, New Yorkers were coming into Rhode Island and then live in their summer homes in Narragansett. And at the time, Governor Raimondo actually had the National Guard going door to door, knocking on the doors of these New Yorkers coming in. And what just stood out to me was, and this guy, he loved it. He was like, I love that they're going after and giving these New Yorkers a hard time. And I said at the time, yeah, but they're Americans. And these are people, he was in favor of open borders, but yet he loved the fact of, as I think of it, it's because they were people of wealth from New York and Connecticut that figured they'd ride out COVID in their Rhode Island summer homes.
Right. Well, and it was also people he might encounter, right? He's not knowing who you're talking about, but he might not encounter any of these people coming over the border. It's far away. And you'll remember when Governor DeSantis sent some to Martha's Vineyard, some of the illegal immigrants.
Yes,
that was a big to-do, and they got rid of them right away. I think what that really goes to show is sort of like the socialists as well. Those people really believe that the structure will keep them safe. Everything they believe in, everything that they hold valuable, that makes their lives so comfortable, is safe and rigid. So they can be generous beyond that. Let in people. What I saw a report suggesting that the illegal immigration waves of the Biden era increased housing by 30%, the price of housing in the United States. That doesn't affect those people. They've got their houses. If anything, that benefits them because the
Yep.
price of their $1 million homes goes up to 2 million, or whatever it might be. That's what that really shows. And I think you see that in all of these examples.
Justin, I'm curious to hear your thoughts on the fundraising. I mean, it is astounding. Helena, folks, and we're certainly getting closer to the window with early voting was starting. But you're talking about a challenger. She raised just in the last quarter $900,000, and this is someone of means, could certainly self-fund, but raised $900,000, and Governor McKee $250,000, a sitting governor. When you just step back, as much as people complain about money in politics, it's pretty astounding when you see how much she is out raising a sitting governor.
It is. And what strikes me most, though, is that I think among Democrats, they look at that purely as an expression of support, right? A lot of people support her. She gets a lot of money. Fewer people support McKee. I wonder if it's almost more like a betting market, right? More people are betting on her winning so they can get favors from her, so they will donate to her versus McKee. And versus compared with the Republican side, it's almost a perfect analogy, perfect comparison, because they've got both of them have less than $10,000 in the last quarter raised. So that starts to raise the questions: why are they getting so much money? And I think it is a show of support, but it's almost, I read it more as a prediction that she is in fact going to win, and so people want to get their chips on the table. So when they call her up in 6 months, she'll have to take the call.
That's disputed, by the way. And I sent you where I think it was a one reporter claimed that Aaron Gukian had only raised a certain amount, but Ted Nesi in his Nesi notes, he said he had actually raised 30,000. So again, that's nowhere close to either McKee or folks. And I don't know how those numbers came off. I'm just curious. Do you think the reason why the Republicans running for office, why they have such a tough time raising money, is because people that would donate to them, a lot of them are just fearful of retribution?
I think that's definitely part of it. There's just no value in it. I mean, you take a big risk. They're unlikely to win, and so you're outing yourself for no reason. On the Republican side, too, it's much less likely that they'll be able to return favors, not only because they don't have the General Assembly, but also because their base of support will evaporate if people start to perceive them. And being a conservative and a Republican, I've seen this circular firing squad all the time. So
Yeah.
if you're a donor implicitly looking for some kind of benefit for having given money, that the Republican, if they try to give you a benefit, will come under fire from their own base. I think all of these things start to play into it, and I think that's why you see it. And so ultimately, the Republicans conclude that they're not going to be able to win, no matter based on money, and so they go in a different direction. And they say, I'm not going to bother fundraising so much because I've got to do these other things to try to gather support, whether it's meeting with people, social media, people who won't be giving me money, but will increase my support. I think that's really it. Because if you look at it, I mean, I think it was Attorney General Narona was disputing the idea of 40% support for Republicans. But to me, that's an imbalance. Their theory of government is that if 40% of the people support them, then their donations would be, say, 40% of what the Democrats get, or something like that. They think it's like a natural flow of money that follows support. It's not. I think it really shows you the imbalance of power in the state and the impossibility and how locked in the insiders have things.
Nationally, the media I think they've done a good job at fully vetting and getting out there what the DSA, what their basic platform is, which is defund the police, abolish ICE, abolish prisons. They want to get rid of the Senate. They totally in favor of open borders. They actually want to get rid of the presidency. Closer to home, though, normally there was a debate Channel 12 hosted with the Democrat candidates running for lieutenant governor. Whoever wins that primary takes on Republican John Laughlin. But I don't believe, And this is going to seem like a criticism, but I just don't think locally our local press have done a good enough job as really vetting out. And what I'm saying is they could have really fleshed out and made a difference and showed how some like a Sabina Matos, to me, she's actually more of a socialist. I just don't think they're doing a good job because they're treating it almost as though well, they're all Democrats, they're all the same. But what we're seeing is these socialists that are running, they in fact are very different than some of the traditional Democrats.
Oh yeah, they're far left. In fact, Hassan Piker was, I guess,
Yes.
media influencer, some far left socialist. He's almost. It's starting to seem to me he's probing to see how far he
Yes.
can go, parading Mao around, saying yes, we need to arrest Trump administration people and ICE people, which our friend Enrique Sanchez just loved and
Yeah.
wrote over. But he's probing and to see how far he can get with this talk, this totalitarian communist dictator talk. And what he's finding is, as you're suggesting, there's no pushback. The news media, they just don't care. They don't want to make that connection because to them in their heads, it's just talk. It's just showy talk. They don't realize that no, they're going to come for you.
Yes.
And we saw this in New York. I forget another media personality online among left-wing Democrats withdrew support from Mamdani because Mamdani released a list of all the homeowners are going to pay extra tax, like with their addresses, like a hit list, and he was on it. And she's, wait, you're not supposed to do this to me. No, they're going to do it to you. They'll start with arresting the Trump administration, sure, but then they're going to come for you, McKee. They're going to come for you, folks, to you, Raimondo. All of them will be on the hit list if they're not sufficiently left wing. But for some reason, there's this mental block where with the news media, I think they're afraid of proving people like you and me right, for one thing.
Yes.
They're also afraid of hurting the chances of their preferred candidates. And frankly, I'm starting to think a lot of them really just support this far left cause and just haven't been able to be open about it.
Yeah, we saw it with the race for mayor. And I find the people that are doing the debates, they're very friendly to the progressives. So they don't want to fully flesh it out. But just when you mentioned that Hassan Piker, Justin, I mean, his latest quote is in 2028, there's no way if you're the Democrat nominee that you're going to be supporting Israel. And I just don't understand when you have 4 Democrats running for lieutenant governor and you have a debate on Channel 12. I mean, they don't even broach the Israel question. And yet people like Enrique Sanchez and David Morales, you and I both know they're fully on board with anti-Israel. It's anti-Semitism, but I'll give you the final word on it. But I just find our local reporters, it's like they're late to the party to realize just how extreme these people are.
I don't know that they're late. I don't think they're ever coming to the party.
Maybe you're right.
I think they've been trained to identify the best interpretation I can put on it, apart from the fact that they're far left lunatics who are lying to us all, which is possible for some of them and many of them. The charitable thing is interpretation is that they've just been trained to identify news in a way that does not compute, right? The bad guy's a fascist. There's a white guy, probably blonde, German heritage. That's a fascist. They can't even identify that these people that they think are so cute, these, their skin's a little darker and they don't have Anglo names. These cute socialists, they'll never do us any harm. They're just expressing it's all just an expression of their anger and their enthusiasm. And this is why you see Morales getting away with saying, our hope will trump their fear. The socialists, and particularly Morales and his supporters, are all about fear, right? That's central to their platform. And so it's just a plain lie, but the news media wants to see it, and it gives them an excuse to ignore where the real danger, and as you say, the anti-Semitism, almost to the point of a Kristallnacht kind of experience in some places, where that's really coming from. They just can't see it because they don't want to. They've been trained to spot other things like Republicans who support business a little bit too enthusiastically or something like that.
Yeah, you could really also, before we get to Katz's Corner, what I also really noticed was there was almost a sense of joy when former Cranston Mayor Alan Fung announced, I'm going to run for office as a rep, but I'm going to run as an independent. It was almost like, thank God, because we've always liked Mayor Fung. We were so uncomfortable with him running, as a Republican. He had Kevin McCarthy come in. Like, thank God he saw the light, and now he's running as an independent. And I, completely disagree with that. The Republican Party was very good to Mayor Fung. He was the standard bearer 2014 against Raimondo, 2018. And then they couldn't have done more to try to push him over the finish line against Seth Magaziner, but he just came up short. Folks, it's time for Katz's Corner. This is a story that Justin Katz has found. What do you have this week, Justin?
Well, what's caught my attention this week is I mentioned a little bit of it earlier. Was Attorney General on social media just railing against Republicans and how can they not field a team as if they're letting down their responsibility. And also there was an editorial in the Providence Business News saying we need a two-party system to have choice, or so we can't have so many empty races for General Assembly. And what I wrote about on Anchor Rising, and I think is very important to consider, is these insiders can't rely on this anymore. It's not somebody else's job. It's the Attorney General's job to say, this is not right. Let me see if there's corruption that's keeping our electoral system going in this way. It's the Providence Business News job, as well as the other media, to say, we need viable alternative candidates. Let us do stories about people who are running, maybe with a business friendly attitude. That would be something I would expect from the business publication, but they don't. It's just sort of an acknowledgement that, yeah, this is not good, but it's their responsibility to do something about it. And no, I think we're at the point now that it's the insiders' responsibility to start policing themselves, just as you're saying with the socialism.
Folks, again, he's the managing editor at anchorrising.com, and it's Justin Katz. Justin, excellent job as always, and we'll talk to you again.
Thank you, John. I'll talk to you soon.
All right, folks, there it is, our segment, Politics This Week with Justin Katz. I want to remind you also about the Lodge Pub and Eatery, 40 Breakneck Hill Road in Lincoln. Remember, lunch, dinner, or drinks in the lounge. The Lodge Pub and Eatery, right off of 146. You're absolutely going to love it. I want to go back to, and we have been talking about it. It was a lot of news last week about the Guthrie investigation. I think it is interesting that the sheriff, they put out their own video. He's under heat. He is feeling heat. I want to weigh in a little bit because the notion, for some reason, there are some people, I don't know why, but they really want to keep the option open that the Guthries should be considered suspects. And as I've kind of touched on in the very beginning, like many of you, there are a lot of crimes. Who's the last person that saw the person alive, right? Scott Peterson, Karen Reed. There's countless examples, Mark Perkins, of people, situations where someone is the person responsible and it is the last person to see them alive. Sometimes there are very bizarre cases, like the Elizabeth Smart case. That was very bizarre. There's a good piece on that on Netflix about the Elizabeth Smart case. The police were convinced that it was a member of her family that abducted her because the younger sister said the voice sounded familiar. If you haven't watched it, it's worth watching. With this case, like many of you, when we saw and heard that Tommaso took her home, and that suddenly, and then that week they were very aggressive, towing the car, going into the home. I can see why people thought, and still think, by the way, as I've said, as I meet different people and they all want to ask about the case, there's a lot of people, but I am telling you, the sheriff, they couldn't be any clearer than they are with this statement and talking about the Guthrie family.
Still here. We're not going away. If you could just see the team working, you would see the energy, the concern. They're fired up, and we'll continue to work this case hard.
Is there anything that I forgot?
I want to mention about Ashley Banfield is it is true. She's no longer on News Nation. When she said she thought Annie and Tommaso were suspects, listen, when something like this happens, and in the very beginning, by the way, nobody is cleared because they're investigating. I mean, but it's easy to say that. in the very beginning, everybody is a potential likely suspect, from the next door neighbor to until they methodically go through and clear. I want to take issue with, there was someone earlier saying until someone's arrested, no one is cleared. And that is just fundamentally wrong. And I had 2 police officers that are watching that texted me and said, that is not true. That is people trying to run passive aggressive, saying the family is still involved. Because as I said, when they're doing the investigation, just there's countless examples where, let's just say, somebody is shot and killed, and it happens, whatever, wherever it may happen, Boston, Providence. Okay. And then a family member says, he had a disagreement with so-and-so. Well, then they go and they find out that so-and-so is incarcerated, or so-and-so has a very viable alibi and was out of town at the time. And they go through and then they realize, okay, it's not that person. So the notion of no one is cleared until they make an arrest. I can tell you with a lot of cases, and there's several homicides right now that I'm following, that they know who did it, or they feel very good about who did it. But could they prove it in a court of law? No. There's someone locally, I covered this homicide. There was a guy outside working on his car, and there was someone it was on Monticello Street off Branch Avenue in Providence. And this guy came up, and they have video of him in the mask approaching the gunman, approaching the home. But you can't tell who it is under the mask. And then he made his way away from the street, and you even have him on camera running, but then you can't tell where he went. Now, I know police have a very good idea who that is and what the relationship is, and who that person recently had gotten out of prison. And I know the family of the man killed, that they are convinced it was that person. But the problem is the police cannot prove that person did it. They don't have a weapon, does have an alibi. They don't have no evidence other than they don't have the mask, they don't have the clothes. They are 95% sure it's that person. And again, they even have him on film. So, but could they prove that? You can't just arrest him. You can't just arrest him like that. So the notion of until someone's arrested, everyone, I am telling you, they feel pretty good about that. But let's get back to the sheriff.
To ask her that you want to add?
There is a number of issues have been brought up about people being cleared of this investigation. We served a few search warrants. We talked to individuals, and we move on, because if the evidence is there, we continue that path.
You got to remember, when it comes to the ransom notes, and I'm going to show them again, you got to remember what the ransom notes are being sent to the media. The media can say, okay, we're not going to publish them. But you have that reporter, what's her name? She was a reporter at a local station. She then recently just went on her own. And just in the last week, she basically revealed the contents of the ransom note. I completely agree. I think the sheriff's been a day late, dollar short. I think he's been behind the 8 ball. As I mentioned earlier, the Wall Street Journal piece, there've been so many mistakes. I believe that they were not prepared for an investigation like this. I know that they may say you don't want a Monday morning quarterback, but if you go back to just some of the things that happened, such as initially they didn't think the dried blood of Nancy, and I have that, they didn't think that was tied into the kidnapping. They should have that her house, they shouldn't have released it so soon. That house should have remained a crime scene. There's the blood. Annie and Tommaso's house, that was the last place Nancy was, should have been a crime scene. They have a plane that could have gone over the area in the first few hours, and they did not have the proper person qualified that could operate the camera system of the aircraft. What is the point of having a tool like that if then that's the moment of truth that you need it. You also have this back and forth between, did she wander off or was she really abducted? And it seemingly the family was insisting there's no way she wandered off. But I understand police play the odds, and police were playing the odds of, 95% of the time, silver alert, somebody went for a walk, fell into a ravine, they're somewhere around there. So then you're not fully approaching it like that.
But that doesn't mean those individuals are cleared. It just means that we met with them because we felt like there was a need. There was probable cause established through evidence, tips, whatever, and presented to a court, and we went on. Does that mean those individuals are cleared? Not necessarily. It just means that we took a look at something that was concerning to us, and now the evidence takes us elsewhere. But
I want to just mention that has never been confirmed. Whoever says that, we don't know that. We don't know that. So that statement is false. Why did Tommaso go into the house? We don't know that. That's never been confirmed. Show me that. No one has that. That's not true. So this is where people spread false information, misinformation. Why did he go into, you don't know that. We haven't heard that. That has not been released. I know this case as well as anyone, and I can tell you that has never been confirmed.
More to that point, I can't be more clear. I said this earlier on, and I say it again. The Guthrie family is not and have not been suspects in this investigation. We have talked with them, worked with them. They are not suspects.
Despite that, there are people still pushing it. Unknown. Haven't released that. Did you come home and call someone? We don't know. Come home and email someone? They don't tell you everything. He's even said they don't tell everything. I know some people. You have to go with the facts that they have put out there. And as far as the ransom notes, there was the second ransom note that we never intended to hurt her. It was not our intention. We didn't grip the seriousness of her physical condition, heart-related, buried with nature. Now, to me, that is someone seemingly trying to justify what they just did. Now, the fact that they released that certainly gives credence that they thought it was real. And then the same thing, I think the thing that really stands out with this is the fact about, you got to remember when this was sent. The next day, the Monday, and they mentioned the watch and the floodlight. So I want to come back to, if in fact this happens where suddenly she's gone and you get that type of note, I could see where they definitely thought that was legit and that was real. But the bottom line for all of this, for him doing the video, the sheriff, and releasing the notes, it is still, I don't know how else to, they don't have it. They don't have a suspect. They don't have a vehicle. It was, I take exception with the people that even say someone knows something. I want to just throw out a scenario of, what if it were two brothers? They're not going to turn on each other. If you and I did this, if you turn me in, then you're going to get turned in. I believe the only way this gets solved is if somehow somebody knows, and unfortunately you got to wait for them to get in trouble, and then someone says, and it would be an attorney, goes to police and said, my client has information about that Guthrie case. You saw it recently with that doctor that they found after all those years. Someone ratted him out. They didn't know. That guy was living in a boat offshore. The guy that lived in Jamestown or Newport. They didn't know where he was. Somebody got caught doing something, and it becomes and that's the conversation, by the way. Tell us something we don't know. And then they come out with, my client has information about that case. It is frightening, but the whole notion of like he can't.
Might jog somebody to kind of think about who would have written this. How was this done? I think anybody who reads them.
I don't think there's enough there. I disagree with that. That is true about, and that's also on Netflix, a great thing about the Unabomber case. Great thing is but that was a full manifesto that he published. With the Unabomber case, that was a situation where this guy, Ted Kaczynski, he was a nut his entire life. And so with the Unabomber case, when they published in the Chicago Tribune, all these different newspapers published his manifesto, it was his brother that read it and said, wait a minute, I know, I can tell you who that sounds familiar with. He contacts the FBI, and then, boom, they go to the parents' house, and in the attic, there's some of the writings. But even then, it took a while to find him, right? He was living way off the grid in a small cabin with no heat and no indoor bathroom in Montana. As the FBI was surveilling the Unabomber, they watched like a bobcat eat a deer or so. I mean, he was way off the grid. So I disagree with that. I disagree with someone just from the ransom note. I don't think there's enough there. And they're not getting continual notes. Savannah put out the video to try to get them engaged again, to get them talking.
By investigators, we look at it, and clearly there's things in there that are very concerning to our investigative team. So we hope that by releasing the actual note, we'll get some response from the community.
Did the Guthrie family know you'd be releasing?
Absolutely.
6 months in, what's your relationship with the FBI?
I want to.
It's a good relationship. It's always been a good relationship.
I don't know about that. I am familiar with that neighbor, but what I'm saying is they haven't released. We're trying to find this vehicle. They haven't come out with anything like that, and I think because they don't have it. It's as simple as that, folks. This portion of our program is brought to you by ServPro of Providence. Now remember, when disaster strikes, or maybe you're having some flooding problems, ServPro of Providence, they could certainly help when disaster strikes. If you have a fire or a flood, you can depend on ServPro of Providence. Fire, flood. If you have a fire, you're going to have fire damage. You're going to have smoke damage. Then you're going to have water damage. Then you could have mold. ServPro of Providence, 401-941-5500. When disaster strikes, 24/7. Fast, thorough, professional. ServPro of Providence, 401-941-5500. Look for them on social media. I just take exception with the whole business of somebody knows. It doesn't seem like it's a big circle. This to me more and more is either a lone wolf or maybe a team of two. A team of two that thought, we're going to grab this lady, we're going to hold her for like 24 to 48 hours, and then poor Nancy perished while they had her. But the reason why I don't think that they would engage would be the fact that you start to do that, it would in fact, you run the risk of more exposure that they could catch you. I mean, is this like really a question? Is that really a question? You don't think that they would check something like that? Really? Like, you really don't think the FBI and the investigators, like when someone asked that, do you think they didn't think of that? Like, does someone really think that? Don't you think that would have been one of the first things that they would check? No. Watch the bombing of Pan Am 103, and you get a good sense of just how thorough the investigators are. I'm surprised when I see things like that. Admittedly, though, I understand. I've had the opportunity to really be around seasoned investigators. And so when I see something like this is someone that clearly hasn't had that opportunity, because that was like checked in the first hour that you check something like that.
We've been a member of what is known as the Southern Arizona Violent Crime Task Force, headed up by the FBI, for decades. We've always participated, and to this day we still do. It's not just a great relationship; it's one that's very.
Listen, this business of people that want to do the passive aggressive, it sounds like the family. Here's the part I can't. I'm not. Maybe I shouldn't even try. But you don't to think. Do you understand how many people were investigating? Do you know the resources that went into an investigation like this? Do those people really seem like the type? The people that say this stuff must have all I can think of is they have a very low opinion of the FBI and investigators. That's all I can think of. Because to think that they would be able to pull this off and get away with it. And the reason why Tommaso could do it is because he was in a rock band. The reason why he's a superior criminal is he was in a rock band and Annie's into poetry. So that makes them criminal masterminds. I am at a loss for people to think that.
Valued.
What's your message to the community?
We think somebody knows something. We hope that by releasing some of this information, it will jog somebody to think about what. A lot of people have called us with information, but we also know a lot of people are hesitant to do so. And so I hope that by constantly reminding the public, we're here, we're not going anywhere. If you have information, someone knows who this person is. Someone knows something. We want that person to call us. We need that phone call.
Why haven't you held a press conference about this case?
I can't believe that they even asked that. But that's you don't think rough sketch they don't have that. But you don't think that they would ask that right away? You don't think that that's one of the first things they would check? If someone breaks into a house, local police would see, did someone's cell phone connect to a Wi-Fi? You're talking about, they sent out experienced FBI agents. I don't understand. I don't know what type of sketch they would put out. This type of sketch, that's all they have. You could either have that or a rough sketch. I guess you could have that drawn. Would someone prefer that drawn? No, they don't have it. They don't have it. Now, I also, by the way, I don't think this is going to do anything from the people that want to continue to point the finger at the family, of which, as I've said, if I thought for 2 seconds that somehow the family was involved, and I do know that there are some creators out there. I think that guy that runs the interview room or whatever, he's one of the people who keeps pointing the finger at the family. Savannah mentioned, I don't know who she was talking about. I don't think she was talking about any of the YouTube people. I don't think so. But it's unknown. So she like threw that out. And I know a lot of people, for whatever reason, keep going back at her. But there are the fact that can't be denied is whoever this is, they were able to get in and out with her, and their phones did not ping, and they don't know what vehicle they got her out in. Period. That's what happened. That's where they're at. Folks, I want to remind you about J. Perry Paving. Call them today at J. Perry Paving. Call them 401-732-1730. High quality, fair pricing, exceptional service, 20 years experience, specialized commercial paving, residential paving, seal coating. For a free estimate, call J. Perry Paving, 401-732-1730. 401-732-1730. And remember, no one has a better package for veterans than J. Perry Paving. They have a great package. So if you're a veteran, maybe your mom, dad, free estimate, residential, commercial, serving Rhode Island, Massachusetts, J. Perry Paving, 401-732-1730. I'm showing you what they have put out. I'm showing you what they have put out. So, and he mentions that. Of course they do. Of course they have more. However, what you can't ignore what they're not putting out, which is they don't have a vehicle. They don't have a person that they're trying to find, a suspect. I don't think they have. I think the DNA is a dead end. I think the DNA is a dead end. Him doing this, he's certainly feeling the heat. And I also want to mention what they've been doing has not been working, because I don't think they're getting any tips. Nothing credible. Nothing credible. The business of somebody knows something. I'm not convinced of that. Not if it's a tight circle. Not if it was a lone wolf. I don't know. Why couldn't it be one person? I didn't say it'd be easy, but maybe it was one person.
Mean those individuals are cleared. It just means that we met with them because we felt like there was a need. There was probable cause established through evidence, tips, whatever, and presented to a court, and we went on. Does that mean those individuals are cleared? Not necessarily. It just means that we took a look at something that was concerning to us, and now the evidence takes us elsewhere.
That's a really important point. Just because she's talking to the perpetrator, it doesn't mean she knows the perpetrator. I want to direct people to the film Ransom with Mel Gibson. He's talking to the kidnapper, directly to the kidnapper. He doesn't know who the kidnapper is. Savannah acted like she knew who she was talking to. She doesn't know who she's talking to. She's putting it out there hoping whoever took the mother will see the message. That's who it's designed for. But I didn't get that read at all. It's not like she's saying, listen, Harry, I know it's you. Like, I didn't get that. It's not designed to you. Her message is to who took the mother. Who took the mother may not be in the country. Who took the mother may not be alive. What if it was people that were hired to do it? And then whoever hired them took them out and said, you guys screwed up. But I don't believe, no, I'm just telling you, I don't get that read. But that's who I heard people say that, she would have been better off addressing the general public. But she's not talking to the general public. She's talking to who took Nancy.
But more to that point, I can't be more clear. I said this earlier on, and I say it again. The Guthrie family is not and have not been suspects in this investigation. We have talked with them, worked with them. They are not suspects. They are victims of a very horrific crime.
If someone does have
I think the family blames him, rightly or wrongly, that they have been depicted as suspects. And I don't, by the way, I don't think that's going to go away, because unfortunately, there are people online that are making money off creating the impression that the family's involved. I've seen people post, we had someone post that a chat that he goes into, I don't know whose it is. I think he said 95% of the people think the family's involved. And someone else I saw posted 80%, 75%, whatever of the people in my chats, they all think the family's involved. The problem is a lot of these creators, and if you go online, there are some people, I've never even heard of these channels. I don't know where they originate from. I don't know who these people are, but they put out, you know, Tommaso was arrested, this other stuff. They're not going to stop, right? The reason why they're getting so much traction and views is because they keep amplifying that it's the family. And then there are people that get angry if they go somewhere and people aren't pointing the finger at the family. So I'm curious to see. So there was definitely a flurry of activity, and it really started with Savannah putting out her video. And I'm curious to see if this picks up from anything else. I did see that. I like Brian. I respect Brian and his work. Yes, I did see that. And I think that was a good piece. For those of you, I want to just really point out, I think some people, it would actually behoove you, if you really want to see just how good certain investigators are and how difficult it can be. As I mentioned, there's a piece right now, and it just came out last week, and one of the people that are in it, he was in the show Suits. He plays Mike Ross. And let me, I want to just, yeah, I can, here we go.
I heard on the radio there was a crash.
I know. They're not telling us anything.
Someone said passenger plane. I was told to search for survivors.
The jumbo jet crashed onto the town of Lockerbie in the Scottish borders. Flight number 103 from London Heathrow to Kennedy.
I know there's a lot going on. Mark where bodies are found. Do not move anything. You do not need to move.
Priority is preserving the scene.
How can I help?
Please, we just want to know what's happened to our son.
Nearly 200 Americans lost their lives. We need the black box to tell us how.
If this was deliberate, this whole town's a massive murder scene.
This is Clipper 103.
Pilot never saw it coming.
21 countries have lost citizens in this attack, so inevitably it will require an international effort.
Let's pull together a full factual on this plane. Flying hours, pilot history, whatever we can get. What do you think? Is it a bomb?
Does this mean the bomber was a passenger?
What we know is different than what we can prove, but the investigation continues.
Is anyone called to take credit?
Until they catch who's responsible, we should see it won't happen again.
The family should have been protected and prioritized from the start. I'm going to do everything that I can to help.
This was an act of war, and now we have to find out who we're fighting.
You think you're ahead of them? Trust me, they're ahead of you.
Do you have an appointment, sir?
No appointment, but I know who put the bomb on Pen M103.
I really strongly, that guy, by the way, he went into the American Embassy in January of '89, and the CIA blew him off. This business about crime sleuths, I want to be very clear. This whole business of the interview room, I don't know. They have on that woman, Maureen O'Connell, who I don't know, do they even call her out when she's like totally wrong? I like to follow a case. I like to follow the police, but I don't pretend to be a crime sleuth. I saw with the Idaho Brian Kohlberger situation that so many of them were wrong. And that whole business of the interview room, they're going pretty aggressively after the family. I think that's who Savannah was kind of talking about. All right, folks, we'll see where it goes. Thank you, everybody. Thank you for tuning in.